Welcome back to my channel. Glad you can join me. Today is the 1st of November 2021, and about 5 days ago Adobe has done a huge update to Photoshop and also to Lightroom Classic. Now I use Lightroom Classic more than I use Photoshop because that's the way I edit my photos, but the changes in Adobe Lightroom Classic are huge, but they're very selective. Not everything has changed, just a couple of tools have been modified, and one in particular has been added, and that is the masking tool. And this is something that photographers have been asking for so long. If I wanted to apply a mask to one of my images, I had to export my image from Lightroom to Photoshop. Now that's all well and good because I can bring it back in very easily into Lightroom, but it means that it comes back in as a TIFF file. It is no longer a raw file. Now with this masking tool in Lightroom, it means that I could apply masks in Lightroom, layers and all that, without going to Photoshop. This is huge, and it is such a time saver. The tools are the subject masking tool and the sky masking tool. Why am I saying so excited? Because I shoot a lot of wildlife and a lot of landscape, and especially wildlife. When we shoot at high ISO, we sometimes have a noisy background. The bird or the animal could be nice and sharp, but if we try to bring out too much clarity, too much detail in our subject, the background gets very noisy. What I used to have to do is use the brush tool, brush over the bird, edit the bird, and then brush over the background. Doing the background sometimes could take me about 10 minutes, and then I can blur the background out, reduce the clarity, reduce the detail, and this would soften up the background and make my bird pop. Now, this is just a one-click wonder like that. So let's jump into Lightroom and I will show you this in a wildlife photo and in a landscape photo. So we have three images here. We have a wildlife photo, a landscape, and a nightscape. If we have time, we'll do the nightscape photo. So we go to the develop mode. Now to save a lot of time, I've already pre-edited these images because this is not the goal for today. The goal is to show you why these tools are so good to actually help your image on the way. So this is a little blue male fairy wren calling to his ladies. It was shot at ISO 450. If we zoom into 100%, we can see the background around him. If I start pulling too much detail on him, the background will get even noisier. So where have all these major changes happened? Right up the top of the develop module. Before this big update, we had the crop tool, we had the spot removal tool, the red eye removal tool, the gradual filter, the radial filter, the brush tool. Now this is all been modified, so we only have the crop tool, the spot removal tool, the red eye removal tool. But here, can you see this little dotted wheel here? This is where all the magic is hiding now. If we click on this here, look, see we have add new mask. This is where our mask can be. So we have the select subject, the select sky, but then all the tools that were along the top row before, they're here. The brush tool, the gradient tool, the radial filter tool, the color range and the luminous mask. What I want to talk about today is the subject mask and the sky mask. So for this image here, we're going to select the subject and watch how good Lightroom is at finding our subject. Look at that. It's found our little blue fairy wren and it's masked it. But can you see that it's also selected the stump as well? But look, see in the middle here, between its legs, it's actually selected it as well. But this is very easily removed. But before I remove this, you can see that the mask is in green. Now you can choose any color that you want. If you come up here to the color, see, if I click on color, I can choose any sort of variant color, or I can just say, I want red, I want white, I want black. I'll go back to green. You've also got a slider here, the opacity slider. If it's too strong for you, you can reduce it down, or you can bring it up to 100%. Now 100% I find isn't really good because you can't see where it's actually added. So we'll bring it back down to where I had it, about here. There, I'm happy with that. Like I said, it's actually added a little bit too much. So we come up here. See, under it we have add or subtract. If I click subtract, click on the brush tool. Now I just make my brush tool a little bit smaller. I can just remove it like that. There, beautiful. Now we can also see here to the left of where the color picker is, we have show overlay. We can unclick it or click it on. We don't have to unclick it. As soon as we start editing this image, it disappears. This is what I mean. So if I go to the exposure here, see, as soon as I've touched it, the mask has disappeared. We can increase it a little bit. Now the bird here is a bit too warm, so I can cool the bird down a bit. Now I can add more clarity, more texture to it. I can up the shadows a little bit to the bird, bring the blacks down a little bit. I can increase the overall saturation of the bird. There, that's very nice. All without affecting my background. The image was shot at ISO 450. There's already a bit of noise in there, and I haven't increased the noise. But this is the beauty of it now. I come up here, I click on Create New Mask, and again, I will select Subject. There, it's found our subject again. Now what I want to do is, I don't want the bird, I want the background. We come up here to these three little dots here, and we say Invert. Beautiful. Can you see now that it's only our background? Can you notice that it hasn't selected between the legs? What we do now here is we click Add to the mask. We click on the brush and we just paint the brush in, like so. Beautiful. Now what I can do is, if I want to reduce the exposure of the background, why would I want to reduce the exposure in the background? To make my bird pop. Remember, there's some noise. I can reduce the clarity, reduce the texture. A dehaze, I normally add dehaze to a subject to sharpen it up. For this, I'll reduce the dehaze. This will fog up the background a bit. This is getting very soft. I can reduce the exposure a little bit more. This is so good. Can you see how a bird stands out so much? This is what the image looks like now that we've applied these subject masks. The image on the left is what we started with. This was the edited image, but without the subject mask added to our image. Look how nice the image looks on the right now. It's taken me less than 2 minutes to go from what was on the left to what was on the right. Before, if I wanted to reduce the noise in the background, I would have had to apply the brush tool. And this is very time consuming because I've got to be very selective of how I use the brush tool, zoom into 100%, mask around the edge of the bird and all that. Here, Lightroom found it within 10 seconds. Adding 2 masks took me less than 2 minutes. Can you see how much time it can save you? This is why I'm saying it is a major update, even though just one tool has been added into Lightroom. If you haven't used it yet, check it out. It is so cool. So now let's jump in to our landscape image. This is an old hut in the scenic rim, about 2 hours drive from my place. This was a very overcast day. You can see there's rain coming towards. About 10 minutes later, the heavens opened here and it just bucketed down. You can also see I've edited it a little bit, but I've just about pushed it to the limit. In this image, we're going to use the sky mask tool. So we come up here, we click select sky. Can you see that it's also selected one of the background mountains here and one over here? This is because they're so soft and they seem to blend in the background, but we'll leave it like that for the time being. We just come up, we reduce the exposure, and you notice that the mask overlay has disappeared. We'll just reduce it down a little bit, increase the shadows, reduce the highlights a little bit, and we'll add some texture. Overcast skies like that, it's nice to add some clarity, some texture, really grunges them up. Just add a little bit of dehaze. I can come up here to the color, I can add a bit of warmth to it. This looks so much nicer, look at that. And we haven't touched the foreground. This is about where I want to leave it. But look at my foreground here. I'd like to change the foreground, but I really want to touch the house here. We'll come up here and we'll go select sky again. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to invert it there. And we come up here, we click on invert. There, now look, it's selected all our foreground. So now we can increase the exposure a bit. That looks really nice. Just tone the image down a little bit, add a bit of clarity, add a bit more shadows. Now that looks much nicer. So now let's do something about the very dark foreground in this hut here. We come up to create mask and we say select subject. It's not a bird, it's not an animal, but it will find it. Look at that, so easy. Now this would have taken me at least 5 to 10 minutes to mask this hut out. Now it's just selected a little bit in the background here, but that's easy to get rid of. We just click subtract again, click the brush, and we'll just paint out the sky. Perfect. I can increase the exposure in the hut, and I can bring up the shadows. Look at that. I can warm it up a little bit. If I want to, I can add some more saturation to make it pop a little bit. And look at that. Look how good it looks. I click done here. So the image on the left was the edited image before we added the sky masking tool and the subject masking tool. And look at our image on the right here. Look how nice it looks. Can you see why I'm sort of so excited? Why I'm sort of relieved, saying, great, these tools are in here. This is going to save me a huge amount of time. It is just great to see Adobe finally stepping up to the plate and making this program even more fantastic to use. So now let's quickly look at the nightscape image. This image here, this is quite good. Now when we're shooting nightscapes, look at this, ISO 6400. Again, I just come up here. We're not going to do too much here. I'm just going to select sky. Now the problem with nightscapes is that we normally expose for the sky. We don't want to blow out the sky, but it means our foreground is always quite dark, like this image. So here I don't want the sky. What I want to do is just invert. I want the foreground. I can just bring it up. There, look at that. Add some saturation. I can cool it down a little bit. Less than a minute it's taken me to do this, and look at the difference. This is why I'm saying that these tools, once you start using them, you're going to be wrapped with this new feature in Adobe Lightroom. But there is a caveat here. When you do the update, if you haven't done it yet, you will find that Lightroom will tell you it needs to update the catalog. And it also tells you that once you've updated the catalog, your previous catalogs will no longer work in Lightroom. You have to update them to the newer version. In regards to the new features, I hope you can see why they are so good now to use in Adobe Lightroom Classic. So if you found value in this video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. Stay safe, enjoy photography, enjoy editing now with all these new features, and I'll see you next time.